Minimalists.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Minimalist Podcast, where we discuss what it means to live a meaningful life with less. My name is Joshua Fields Milburn.
And I'm Ryan Nicodemus, and together we are the Minimalists.
Hello, everybody. Well, welcome to episode 166. Today, we're going to talk about hope. And because we're talking about hope, I thought we'd have a special guest in here today. We know her as V. Her name's Diane Capaldi, right?
Yep, that's perfect.
But I just call her V. Every time we've had coffee before, we've interacted online, and now you're here today because you have a very hopeful story from a place of deep, deep valley in your life. Actually, you've traversed several valleys to get to where you are today. And we don't really do interviews on this podcast. You're going to help us answer some questions today, but I'd like to give some context. So maybe you could talk a little bit about your backstory. What's the big picture view of who V is and how we got where we are right now?
Well, I guess I should start with V is short for verb because I think I'm a verb and not a noun. So that'll give you a good backstory.
Nice.
I'm 55 years old and proud of it, ladies. I'm so proud. And at the age of 23, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and told that I was going to be bedridden and live a very non-productive life and that it was a progressive, debilitating disease and just hang on for the ride and my life was going to end.
You were given a death sentence, basically.
Truly, it was a death sentence.
At age 23.
I was married to my high school sweetheart 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What was happening then? You had some symptoms, I assume, or did you just go in and they randomly assigned this 2-letter label on you?
Right. It almost felt like that. No, I don't want people to get their panties in a bunch, but I did get the hepatitis vaccine, and the next day I woke up with symptoms of MS, which ultimately were diagnosed as MS. Not an anti-vaxxer, I'm just stating my story.
Yeah. Oh, and also, I mean, so hepatitis vaccine, I assume, covers, and I'm not a doctor by any stretch. We've had doctors on the podcast plenty of times, and not kook doctors either. But I remember when we were living in Missoula, the good food store there, which is the Whole Foods equivalent. Yeah. There was an employee who had hepatitis
It's better than Whole Foods, but anyway.
Yeah. There was an employee there who I guess who worked at the salad bar and had Hep A. Ooh. And it was like the first thing you saw in the newspaper was they were recommending, well, everyone should, if you ate at the good food store, go out and get a hepatitis A vaccine. And I'm like, I guess I should probably do that. I've eaten at this salad bar 2 or 3 times a week. I should definitely do that. And then I just did a little bit of like just surface level research, and I'm like, oh, like there are some serious potential problems. And by the way, if you get Hep A, it's not the same thing, but it's kind of like getting chicken pox, where once you recover from it, you are effectively vaccinated for the rest of your life. Now, doctors, don't yell at me. Please consult your doctor if you want any real medical advice here.
We're just having a conversation. Yeah, we're not recommending anything. But so that's crazy. So you got this vaccination. You woke up the next day. You started having these symptoms. They diagnosed you with MS. So how did that, if I may, how did that affect your marriage? Like when you got that diagnosis?
I was married to a great man, but the marriage was not able to outlast MS, and that's very common in the MS is the second. People with MS are the second youngest and longest living population in institutions in America. So it's definitely a progressive, debilitating disease. So the type A overachiever verb in me, the day I was diagnosed, got involved with the National MS Society. Was a fundraiser. Was actually the largest fundraiser in the state of Pennsylvania and Delaware. Went on to be on the board of directors, and by the age of 37, I did become legally disabled from the effects of MS on my body, which resulted in bilateral loss of both of my hands. So I couldn't use my hands, couldn't feel the left side of my body, and I was choking, which is what kills a lot of us from MS. We choke.
Yeah, so you're having problems swallowing. So not only can you not feed yourself, if you could get fed, you can't necessarily swallow the food all the time.
Right. I was struggling. Your throat gets like a Charlie horse. Did you ever get like a Charlie horse when you're working out or like in your feet or your calves?
Never in my throat though.
You get it in your throat. It's called rigidity. So my throat would spasm like that. Wow. So to try and save myself, I moved to California because I have body temperature regulation issues. I did all this stuff. Before MS took things from me, I built and sold technology companies. I was grateful to have millions of dollars in the bank and be very successful.
Yeah, you did really well as an entrepreneur and as a business person throughout your 20s. And by age 30, you had achieved the American dream, so to speak, except your health was continuing to dwindle.
And that's, was so amazing. I did achieve the American dream, and I was connected because of my work with the MS Society, and I worked in technology, so some of the biggest names in America. I'll do anything that they tell me to do, and I'll work really hard, but MS was winning at every turn. Yeah. So I went to Burning Man, which is an artist, no judgment, self-expression event that happens in the desert.
This was 2011?
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Back when Burning Man was cool.
Back before it was so commercialized. When it was like really hippies and not. But anyway, so I went to Burning Man to pray, to figure out what my course was, because what was in front of me was homelessness, potentially institutionalization, or I was contemplating suicide. Sure. I do have a daughter, and it's not the greatest thing to think of when you have who was in college at the time.
But we need to be able to talk about that too. I was just reading this really sad story over the weekend. There's this news anchor in Detroit, Fox 2 News. I think she was a meteorologist. Is that right, podcast Sean? She had LASIK surgery, and like the pain was so immense afterward. Within, I think it was 2 or 3 months, she killed herself. She has 2 young kids and a husband and an ideal life. But wow. and then here's the messed up part is like you realize that there are a lot of people who have had LASIK surgery who have killed themselves after having LASIK surgery. Not because it makes you go insane, clinically insane. That's not. It's from pain, and some people last longer than others. One guy who lasted 6.5 years, but having burning every second of the day kind of pain because they messed up the surgery, and realizing like. Well, I hate to say this for him, but he thought that this was the only path that he had to go. And I think we have such a stigma around suicide that it becomes this thing that is both like, it becomes cool to get like real sad and dark and then get suicidal. It becomes a cultural meme. But the honest thing is, like, we need to be able to talk about things like euthanasia or ending your life in a safe, humane way. In many ways, our friend Dr. Christopher Ryan, he talks about how we're often far more humane to our pets than we are to sick people in this country. Like giving people massive. I remember my mom was dying, and her going through the chemo and radiation, and man, she must have been 85 pounds by the end of all of that. And like, it wasn't really living at all. And she was just, they were perpetuating suffering in a way. And I didn't know any better at the time. That was the prescription of Western medicine. So V, you've dealt a lot with diagnoses and prescriptions from other people and effectively death sentences. How did you keep hope throughout all of this?
My parents, both of them have passed, and I was fortunate to know that they were going to leave this earth, so we had time together. And my mom told me on her deathbed that I came out of the womb smiling and have been smiling ever since. So I was born genetically happy. Yeah, I'm very happy. I am an optimist, and the verb in me is a fighter. I'm from Philadelphia. I'm 100% Italian, and I'm Taurus the bull. So like, come on, did I have a choice but to be like this overachiever type A personality? And I just always been a fighter. If they say no, that means yes to me. Matter of fact, I used to give talks in the technology sector, which is where I built companies, that no is yes. If a buyer says to me no, that means, well, I'm going to get this deal. If they say to me yes right away, they're never going to write me the order, So I've just always been that way, and went to Burning Man and realized that, praying every day at the temple, they build a temple there, that maybe our healthcare system where you go and they say, oh, you have a sneeze, here's a drug to get rid of the sneeze. Maybe the problem was I was listening to our healthcare system, and maybe it was the way I was living my life that was a problem. And the beauty about this, I will tell you, is I had already started my path to minimalism. So I was 6 years into being a minimalist. Cool. And I was already studying Buddhism. I was already meditating. I was already moving my body consciously before I went to Burning Man. Okay. The thing I wasn't doing was taking ownership for my health beyond going to the doctor and doing what the doctor told me, meaning, what was I putting in my mouth? Yeah. What was my stress level like? How many hours was I sleeping? I was not consciously involving those parts in my wellness program.
You're sort of outsourcing your health. And I know that I would do that with doctors. And I'm still dealing with a lot of health issues right now because throughout my 20s, I took an antibiotic for about 10 years daily. Relatively benign, I'm saying this in quotes if you're not watching this on YouTube. The doctor said, it's a relatively benign antibiotic. You'll just take it every day. And so I did. I took every day for over a decade, and totally destroyed my gut. I'm dealing with some SIBO issues right now.
That's so hard.
Yeah, it's and realizing like, well, no one is going to be as responsible for my health as I am. No one's going to care as much as I do, or at least they shouldn't. And I can't just outsource this. I can get advice from people, and that's advisable to do that. But I need to take it all into consideration. I need to be willing to dive in and do my own research as well. And that sounds like that's what you did. That's the path you went down, figuring out what works for you and your body.
I really did, which now we call that biohacking, in the the modern day.
Sure.
So through diet and lifestyle choices, I have successfully biohacked my way to the point where I have not only stopped what MS was doing to my body, I have reversed every symptom of MS on my body, which has resulted in I no longer take any drugs for MS. I no longer see Western medicine doctors, and I no longer spend any money on healthcare, which I exhausted in 10 years, $2.5 million in liquid assets listening to Western medicine.
That's incredible.
So the fact that my healthcare today is zero other than insurance premiums, and I do get blood work, fecal, urine, and saliva studies, so I do pay whatever insurance doesn't cover for those. But that's just to monitor my body, my gut health,
Sure.
My inflammation markers, all of those things. I have multiple sclerosis, Epstein-Barr, Hashimoto's, and Lyme disease.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so we did a podcast episode with two of my doctors. One doctor, Dr. Tommy Woods, and then Chris Kelly, who run a company called Nourish, Balance, Thrive, and they take an integrative medicine approach, sort of what you're talking about here. It's sort of the best of both worlds. So they'll still look at, obviously, it's really important to look at studies, and we're not rubbing crystals against me in order to heal my gut. But at the same time, we're looking at what are alternatives to antibiotics, right? Because ultimately I can go that route, and there's nothing wrong with, just like there's nothing wrong with vaccines, right?
Yeah.
Like we're not anti-vaxxers. I vaccinate Ella, make sure she's vaccinated. So my 5-year-old, we make sure that she has her vaccines. But at the same time, it's about being cautious about what we're putting into our body and what other people are telling us to put into our body. So you went through quite a journey, and in 2011 you started turning some things around. You changed your diet. You run a website now. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I started my healing journey of getting conscious, my Italian family and friends were like, "What? You're gonna," no one was really very supportive. So I went to social media. I actually had some friends one day. They're like, we're kind of tired of you talking about all this. Why don't you just go to social media, and you're really bossy, so you should just be like Paleo Boss Lady. So I was like, okay. So I went to social media. I was eating a paleo lifestyle at that time, which for anyone that doesn't know, that's basically fruits, vegetables, and protein. We don't eat gluten, grains, refined sugar, dairy. And I started a paleo lifestyle, and you talk about hope. The paleo lifestyle was helping me, and then I happened to see a TEDx. You guys did a TEDx. I did a TEDx. We know how powerful and amazing those are. This was done by Dr. Terry Walls, and it was the day it came on YouTube. And at that time, I could only use my voice to activate the computer, so I was screaming at the computer because I was not feeling well from MS. And I was like, diet, lifestyle, MS. And all of a sudden this TEDx came up with Dr. Terry Walls, and she's like, here's me in a tilt reclining wheelchair from MS. And here she's standing on the stage. And that was the first hope, because I've always been a fighter and I was not going to stop fighting. But now I had someone saying, I went from a wheelchair to standing, and I not only stopped what MS was doing to my body, but I've reversed what MS was doing. So I immediately started doing exactly what she said. And to date, I am potentially one of the most healed, even more than Dr. Walls, and that's not in a negative way, but I don't take any drugs. And she doesn't take any disease modifying drugs, but there are maintenance drugs that she takes to support her. I take nothing.
Yeah, and so what's fascinating here is the thing that gave you hope is you saw a template. You saw the possibility, right? Whereas before, when you were 23, if you go back to the beginning, you were given the opposite of possibility. You were given pessimism. In fact, I printed out some definitions for hope here, because hope is such a slippery word, right? It's it can mean so many things. When I looked it up in the thesaurus specifically, there were all these different words like desire and wish and expectation and aim and goal and plan and dream and daydream and pipe dream, expectation, expectancy, confidence, faith, assurance, promise. And I circled some words here that when I think of hope, when I say hope, what I'm often talking about is aspiration, ambition, optimism. And the way you find optimism quite often is you see that, oh, there's a different template. I've been prescribed this one thing, this one template. It's like when we were living the American dream, right? It's like that's one template, but it's not the template. And Western medicine works really great for a lot of things. If I break my bone, I'm not going to rub crystals on that either. I'm going to get it in a cast. I'm going to make sure, say if I have a really bad infection, I'm definitely going to take antibiotics if they're going to save my life. No question about that. It makes sense to do that. Same with insurance. You mentioned like having insurance. I assume it's like catastrophic insurance. So if you get into a car accident or something, because you're traveling the country right now in your van and doing a tour. Before we dive into these questions, Sean, if you could put a link to V's TEDx talk in the show notes, and also her website is called paleobosslady.com. You're also Paleo Boss Lady at all the social medias, I believe.
Yeah,
beautiful.
It's a good TEDx talk. It's funny how those little 8-minute talks can have such a huge impact. Yeah, I highly encourage our listeners to go check it out.
So I think today when we're talking about hope, Ryan, the one definition here in the dictionary that really stood out to me was, well, there were two. One was wanting something to happen. That's sort of the loose definition of hope. When you have hope for something, you want something to happen. But for me, the important part, sometimes you and I mock The Secret. Not because we don't believe in like the power of intention. We absolutely do. But we also have to believe in the power of action. You have to couple your intention with action. So when I think of hope at its essence, this definition really stood out to me. Out of all of the dozens of definitions, I have 2 pages of hope definitions printed out here. This one stood out the most. Intend, if possible, to do something. So V, you saw this TEDx talk, and you're like, I noticed something's possible. And I intend to do that. I intend to cure myself. In fact, when medical doctors often go to medical school, they very rarely talk about healing in med school. When they do, it's usually in the context of wounds, like healing a wound. But we often don't talk about the integrative healing, like in healing ourselves, whether it's our mind or our guts or our psychology, our physical health. A lot of it has to do with healing, the damage that we've created. Our body does an amazing job of healing itself if we're providing it with what it needs in order to heal, as you found out. So we've got some really good questions here today. Let's start with our first question from John in Minnesota.
I'm on board. I'm purging, get rid of stuff, but I was hoping to feel better about it. I still feel frustrated and not as calm as I thought I would. So the process is not producing the results I'd hoped for. I was wondering if you guys could help me.
All right, John in Minnesota.
He's gotten rid of stuff. He's not.
He's kept the accent.
He kept the accent.
I noticed. So my wife is from Minnesota, and she like at times, I don't know if you ever notice it with her, Ryan. It comes out like in the strangest.
Oh
thing.
yeah, man.
Once she gets around her family, especially, like for some reason, it's like this familial residue, and the accents all come out thick. Yeah. So what do you think? What do you think about for John, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I had a. Well, this isn't funny. Ironic, not haha funny. Funny how we always use that word when it's not appropriate. Anyway, I had a high school kid email me a couple years ago. He was like 17 years old, and he's like, "Hey, man, I'm in high school right now. I'm having a really hard time with depression." He's like, "I'm tired all the time. There's some weeks I don't go to school," because he was suffering from a specific type of illness. And he was like, "I have come across the Minimalists." And he's like, "Man, for the first time in a long time, I'm feeling hope." And I just wanted to write and ask you, is this the answer to all of my life's problems? Is this going to cure my depression? Is this going to give me energy? And, I just wrote back to him. I'm like, "Hey, man."
Send him a PayPal invoice.
Right. The answer is yours for $19.99. No, I just wrote him back and I was like, "Look, man, minimalism is not this magic bullet answer of solving all of life's problems. What minimalism helps us to do, specifically Josh and I, and what we write about, is how we use this tool to help us filter through all of the noise and the impulses that we face. And it's not just the impulses that we have personally, but the impulses that are forced upon us in society. And yes, can minimalism, help this? I was explaining to him, can minimalism help you to live a more deliberate life? Yes, but no, unfortunately, there are limits to what minimalism can help with. And I feel very similar towards John here. John may have went into this journey thinking that, I'm going to get rid of my stuff and I'm going to be happy. Mm-hmm. That is, I think, maybe a bit of a wrong expectation. Now, I don't think John is hopeless here. I think that there's certainly a lot of hope with John. What I think I would tell him is like, dude, congratulations on getting rid of all this clutter. Mm-hmm. Congratulations of bringing and making your life quieter and a little bit easier to maneuver through. This is the very first step into your new meaningful life that John is trying to live here. Yeah. So now that he's got all this noise out of the way, I think he has to start asking. He has to start asking more questions. And I like what you talk about in your TEDx talk about getting behind the why. So I think John needs to start with like why. Why did he start minimalism, this journey in the first place, and why is he experiencing this frustration? Or what did he say specifically, Josh, how he's feeling?
He said, I was hoping to feel better about it. And he said, I still feel frustrated and not as calm as I thought I would. And the process is not producing the results I'd hoped for.
So the question is why is John not feeling calm right now? And there are so many different answers to that, right?
Yeah, I mean, but ultimately it comes down to one broad answer, and then there'll be specific answers for him that might be different from all three of us, sure. Right? And so if I'm looking at John and what he's asking here, hope says something about the future. So does despair. So when you feel despair, you're saying, I don't feel a whole lot of promise. I feel pessimistic about the future. When I feel hope, I feel optimistic about the future. So they're two sides of the same coin. And if I'm looking backward, there's something called joy and there's something called regret. If you feel bad about the past, you're going to feel regretful. If you feel joy if you feel good about the past, you feel joy, right? And so when you're going in there, Ryan, and you're talking to John about changing the why based on V's TEDx talk, to me the question is, how might your life be better with less? Mm-hmm. That helps you identify what your why is, because if you're just getting rid of the stuff, yeah, you'll feel a weight lifted right away. You're like, oh, look, my living room's a little bit cleaner, right? Or, oh, wow, I can actually see, my kitchen counters now. All the bills are moved off of it. You feel a little bit of relief, but you're not going to experience the joy from the past. You're not going to experience the hope of the future unless you know why you're doing what you're doing. And the way you do that is you figure out, what is your why? How might your life be better with less? Maybe it's finances, maybe it's improved health, maybe it is better relationships, maybe it's contributing to your community, maybe it is being able to grow or read or create things that you weren't able to do before. Your why might be different from my why. Now, the thing that I'm going to say here, Ryan, is he said those aren't the results I hoped for. And my question is, well, what were the results you hoped for, right? That's another way to figure out your why. If it's nebulous, well, I was hoping I'd feel better. Well, what does better look like? You have to get really clear,
specific
on the why. Not just, I hope I'd be happy. Well, what does that even mean? That's a slipperier term than hope even. In fact, I often think happiness is the problem because we're constantly chasing the ephemeral pleasure, right? Like more. Give me more Skittles because it tastes good in my mouth right now. Not realizing like, oh, I am going to regret this later, right? And so if I were to define hope here, I would just say when it's done well, hope is a loosely held expectation without a specific destination. And what I mean by that is sometimes we have to be willing to say, like, I may not have, six-pack abs, or I may not have lose this exact amount of weight. That's not the destination that I want. The destination that I want has to be clear to me based upon what I want, not what societal standards are thrusting upon me.
Yeah. So V, I'm sure in your experience from when you first were diagnosed with MS up until this point? I know you've done a lot of like meditation retreats, you've done different talks, you went to Burning Man. Have you ever had an instance where you had this hope, this expectation of what a certain experience was going to bring you, for it to just not be what you expected at all? And I guess, like, have you ever had that happen, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, I actually just had that happen recently. I'll tell you. You touched briefly. I live in a van and I tour around the country helping people for free learn everything that I use. And
they can find all those tour dates and stuff at your website,
Yeah,
right? Where
yeah.
you're going to be. Yeah.
So I was doing that one person at a time, and the community came back to me and said, we'd like for you to do like 100 people at a time. So I'm like, okay, sure, I'll do that. So in Colorado this year, I did we called it a summit, a weekend where people flew in from all over the world, in South Africa, countries like, South America, Europe. I couldn't believe it, to spend, 3 days with me and a co-host. And I thought, this is me really serving the community. And I'm so proud of myself. It was like one of the proudest days of my life, until 3 days in, and I realized that I physically can't do this. I emotionally can't do this. It's a lot. It was me forgetting that I do still have multiple sclerosis. I have all these things, I just manage them, and that in order for me to stay well, I need to maintain what it takes for me to be well, and that is not 3 days in a hotel with 100 people inspiring them at one time.
Takes a lot of energy.
So it was like a brick hit my forehead, because I'm just trying to help people. That's all I want to do. And I overextended myself, and I actually was now hurting myself trying to help people. So how I regroup was I took off and I went into Mother Nature. I went to Rocky Mountain National Park for 4 days and took a people detox, an outside world detox, and just shut it all down and just hung out with my dog. And I am a minimalist. I only live with 70 possessions. So total, everything I own fits in 60.
Putting us to shame, Millie.
Yeah, everything I own fits in 60 square feet. And to be able to just, it's easy to get outside and turn the outside world off when you live the way that I do. And just to regroup. And for me, it felt like a hopeful thing I was doing was shattered, but what it was life just telling me that wasn't the best use of what I was doing, and I just had to regroup and reposition. Went back to my tribe and said, I can't do this, I'm sorry. And then they came back and gave me, community reignited my hope. So
I was gonna say, isn't that awesome? Like when you something bad happens and you feel like, oh man, like my friends, my family, my community, I've let them down. They're gonna judge me. But like when they come back and they're like, oh no, we love you and we support you. Isn't that like just the best feeling?
It really touched my heart, because in those 48 hours that I was in Rocky Mountain National Park, I did feel sad that I'd let my community down. And I also almost felt sort of like, wow, here I am giving people a message on how to be healthy the way they live their life, and I like overextended myself to an unhealthy, and I did it in front of people, so I felt like, wow. And I was just trying to help. I was so focused on trying to help that I forgot myself in that journey, and that's not really helping people when you forget yourself. So
if you're not there to help, if you're not the best version of yourself, then it's not really going to be helpful for them anyway. I'm thinking recently about my recent issues with SIBO, and all of what John said actually applies. So I've been healing my gut over the last 3 years, working with the great doctors over at Nourish, Balance, Thrive. We did a podcast with them. I think it was episode 138, Sean, if you want to put a link to it in the show notes. But it was about health problems, and we've healed a whole bunch of issues. I had mercury poisoning and a bunch of other things, and now recently though, I've had this huge SIBO overgrowth, so small intestinal bacterial overgrowth for those of you uninformed. And he said, I was hoping to feel better about it, like because I'm taking massive action. I'm 18 days into this 90-day protocol. And you should see, Ryan has seen the amount of pills that I'm taking every day.
Crazy.
it's
an
a hard
army.
protocol.
Yeah, and so and my diet has radically changed and everything. But he said I was hoping to feel better about it. I still feel frustrated, not as calm as I thought I would be. and the process is not producing the results I'd hoped for. And what I would say is maybe the timeline is more protracted than what you think. I mean, for me, it took about 8 months for me to simplify my life when I was letting go of stuff. Ryan did it in 21 days, but even then,
I'm pretty extreme with stuff sometimes.
Even then, though, it wasn't over. It's maintenance after that, right? And moving on, it's learning about not bringing in the wrong things as well, bringing in the appropriate things.
Even after those 21 days, like it's not like I woke up and I was like, oh man, like life is perfect now.
Right.
It was more about after those 21 days, I could see a path. I finally was able to see the path that I really wanted to go down. And what I like about what you were saying, V, is you regrouped. And maybe that's where John's at right now. He just needs to regroup and really figure out what it is that is truly making him feel this anxiety, and maybe to regroup to really get clear on the path that he wants to take. The other thing, too, is you learned from this experience. And John, buddy, like learn from this experience. What would you have done differently? How are you going to do things differently moving forward? And then the other thing, too, is John, I know there's some positive stuff out there. I know there's some positive stuff that John has experienced from this journey. So
focus on those.
Yeah, definitely focus on those. You don't want to ignore the negatives either, but you definitely want to call out the positives. John doesn't want to look in the mirror. We don't want John to look in the mirror and say, well, this is all for nothing, and then he's just going to go back to, hoarding newspapers or whatever, right? Like there's definitely some positive things that he can take away from this experience. So try to focus on those. And then, yes, just really consider what you're going to do differently moving forward, John. You might, when I think about things in my life that gave me a lot of stress and anxiety, things that made me feel not calm, it usually has to do with being around just toxic people. I'll just say, I'm trying to find a softer way to say it, but sometimes we've got toxic people in our lives, and they've been in our lives for a long, long time, and it's hard to be honest with ourselves. But John, I mean, take a look at the relationships that you have. Take a look at your health, John. How is your health? Because I'll say right now, if John is living on a Twinkie diet, I'm sure he's not. I'm just going to the extreme here because that's what I do. But if he's living on a Twinkie diet,
so the standard American diet.
Yes, the standard American diet. That is going to cause a lot of stress and anxiety. I know that was certainly true for me. My health. I just didn't realize how drinking till 2:00 in the morning and then going to White Castle and doing that 2, 3, 4 times a week. Like how exhausted that made me, which in turn caused me to be more stressed, have more anxiety. So John, take a look at your health. Is it because you don't have time for yourself? Maybe that's what it is. Maybe John is just so busy, he needs to reclaim his time. I don't know specifically what it is, but John, look at the positive stuff that has happened through this journey. Take note of the things that you want to do differently, but really now is the time that you have all this clutter clear, and now that your life is a little bit quieter, really get clear on what it is that you want to do differently and what changes you need to make in your life to help your life to be more calm.
I want to prescribe 2 things to John here. One is there is a really short essay by Derek Sivers called Subtract. And I'm just going to read the first line of it. We'll put a link to it in the show notes, just sivers.org/subtract. He says, life can be improved by adding or by subtracting. The world pushes us to add because that benefits them. But the secret is to focus on subtracting. And then he goes into this analogy of how we're constantly trying to add things like it's going to bring us happiness, joy, hope. But maybe the hope lies from subtracting, getting down to the place where you can have hope for your health and your relationships and other places because you've gotten the superfluous things out of the way. The second thing I would like to gift you, John, is a copy of our book, Everything That Remains. I'll hold it up right here. So we talked about why and discovering your why. In this book, Ryan and I wrote 3 books over the course of the last 8 years. One of them is, we call it a why-to book. This one's the how-to book, minimalism. This one's the what-to book. and really for John, you need to get focused on the why. And I think Everything That Remains will help you do that. If you like our podcast, you'll really like the audiobook version of that podcast. Sean, if you could reach out to John, give him that. Or if you want the book version or the audio or the ebook version, we're happy to give those to you as well.
Before we move on here, V, I feel like we're not giving you enough time to talk about the why. And I know that that's something that you focus on. Explain, because Josh and I talk about it a lot, but why is that so important to you?
It's really interesting because that's something that, in touring around and helping people, a lot of times people ask me, like, what was your why? And my why was me. Mm-hmm. I love myself, and like a lot, like a whole lot. And that was a learned behavior for me. I didn't grow up loving myself. I grew up being self-critical of everything. Like, I looked in the mirror and like, you have freckles, you're Italian, you shouldn't have freckles, your hips are too big, you're, all of those negative things. And for me, my why was me. And why was it me? Because in order for me to be able to get conscious, I had to get in touch with me. And like you guys are talking about, John getting rid of stuff and him not feeling better. I didn't really have any expectations when I started getting conscious about life, other than I felt like that this path was going to lead me to a different place that I had been before. And obviously the place that I wasn't working out so well for me. Yeah. So I knew I needed to take a different path, and I felt like I was worth it. I was worth it. So a lot of people say their why is their kids or their family or my why has always been me. And I've always had hope because I trust myself and I believe in myself. And, once I make up my mind to do something, there's no question that I'm going to do it. So for me, like when people say, oh, because I'm sick, I don't want to change the way I eat because I'm sick. And I'm like, well, I don't change the way I eat because I'm sick. I eat healthy because our food system is broken and I love myself. So why would I self-poison? Has nothing to do with the fact that I have MS. It has everything to do with the fact that I love myself. So, my why is me, which
I love it. No, that's great. I think what you're trying to tell John here is, John, you're worth it, man. Yeah. Figure out what you got to do differently and make those incremental changes in your life, man. You are totally worth it.
Yes, indeed. And we'd love to hear what you all have to say. So if you're listening to this at home, if you have a comment or tip about hope, including advice for John or any of our other question askers today, anyone in our audience, leave us a voicemail, 406-219-7839. You can also email a voice memo to podcast@theminimalists.com. We'll air our favorite comments and tips on a future episode, and stay tuned to the end of this episode for this week's listener comments and tips. It's my favorite part, so make sure you send those in. If you have any listener comments and tips about hope or about anything else, you're welcome to call in 406-219-7839. Ryan, what time is it?
You know what time it is. It is time for our lightning round, where we answer questions from social media.
Indeed, we do. So, V, this is how we usually do it. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We're at The Minimalists. And during the lightning round, this is where Ryan and I both do our best, and now you, V, do our best to answer every question with just a short, shareable, less than 140-character response. But don't worry. We just talk a lot, and then we wrap it up with a pretty bow. Or really, Podcast Sean wraps it up with a pretty bow. And so, you can find all of our pithy answers in the show notes, or all on one website now. Our friend Jessica Lynn Williams, she manages minimalmaxims.com for us. And so all of our nice, pretty answers are there on one website.
All right, our first lightning round question is from Annie. I grew up with parents who believe that success is working until you have lots of money to live comfortably. How does one maintain hope of living a meaningful life when your parents don't believe in that?
So you had a lot of money, V, and were you living comfortably?
Did your parents have expectations of you that you didn't meet?
No, my parents, yeah, they did actually. I talk about it in my TEDx. I was supposed to work at a grocery store and find a husband and make babies and cook and not have a job.
And also eat lots of flour.
Yeah, lots of flour and lots of high inflammatory vegetables. For me, again, my whole healing journey has been self-reflection, and I've had to question societal and cultural norms along the way. And we're all put on this life to live our own version of our best life. Mm-hmm. And I love my family and I love my Italian culture, but I've had to navigate how to respect my culture and my family, but yet be true to myself. And there's nothing wrong with being true to yourself.
Amen.
And, I would just say to Annie that, don't discount your right to be happy. And your parents, I'm a parent and I provide my daughter with a lot of thoughts about the way I see things or believe in things, but that doesn't mean it has to be her. She has to duplicate that. Yeah. She has a responsibility to live her life. And you know what? As a parent, your parents just want you to be happy.
Yeah. Amen.
And, if you can be true to yourself and not measure your life by dollars and cents, I think you will be happy.
But also, so in your late 20s, early 30s, you had a considerable amount of money in the bank, but you weren't living comfortably because you didn't have your health, right?
Right.
And so, it's fascinating that we get this very narrow picture of the good life, and for some reason, the American meme of the good life, the Western meme of the good life, and now it's become more of a worldwide meme of the good life, has to do with an abundance of income, a comfort level of income. Of course, if we look at certain studies, depending on what country you live in, if you're listening to this, you make more than $34,000 a year, you're living in the 1% of the world population, also the 1% of human history as well. So congratulations, you're part of the 1% if you make that much money. However, that said, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily comfortable. I know really comfortable poor people. I know really comfortable rich people. I know really comfortable middle class people. And I think the commonality has very little to do with money. Yes, money does buy you some creature comforts, for sure. However, it also increases the demand of what we think we need. It ups the threshold. The bar of acquisition continues to grow higher because, of course, I need a 4-bedroom house even though there's 2 people living here. Of course, I need the second Mercedes-Benz because the first one is no longer enough. Of course, I need blank, blank, and blank. And so our expectations continue to increase. My short answer here is a comfortable life is not a virtuous pursuit. And so what I would say to Annie here is, I don't think that's what you want to pursue. Of course, you want a certain level of comfort, or I think a better word for that is certainty. You need a certain level of certainty. I need to be certain that reasonably certain these cameras are turned on and that Podcast Sean is actually recording this episode. I need a base level of certainty that this light isn't going to fall on my head as we are recording this episode. You need basic certainty. Food, clothes, and shelter, all those things are really important to live a meaningful life. However, when we're constantly pursuing nothing but comfort, if we're nerfing our entire world, that is not a place from which you will grow at all. And so a comfortable life is not a virtuous pursuit.
My short answer is this: living our life for others is disastrous when we don't consider our own needs, because it is too often that we will put someone or a group of people's needs above our own, which, in a I don't want to sound like I'm being completely selfish here, because that's not what it's about.
No.
It's about I'll give you a perfect example. My father, who is a Jehovah's Witness right now, does not talk to me because I am not a Jehovah's. I'm living with my partner Mariah. We don't have a piece of paper that says we're married, even though I will probably be with her the rest of my life. So if I was to do exactly what my dad wanted, if I was to, get this piece of paper, that's not that big of a deal. I mean, we're not traditional that way. I think it's silly that the government has to be involved with relationships. But regardless, that's not too big of a deal. But if I started to do everything he wanted me to do, going and supporting an organization that I truly just don't want to support, if I was going out of my way to do these things with my life, to live it exactly how my dad wanted, well, then I would be miserable.
The thing also is you could make 1,000 concessions to him, but there would be 1,001st concession.
Right, there'd always be.
Right.
Yeah, there would always be something else, right? And that's actually a great point, because that's so true with Annie here. Annie, you could work until you have lots of money to live comfortably. Your parents, Annie, will probably find something else to suggest the way that you should live your life.
You have $2 million in the bank, but now you need 3.
That's what I was going to say. What is enough?
Right.
I mean, truly, what is enough money? Everyone's definition of enough is different. A lot of money, and I had a lot of money. I had a lot of money for a long time. I never had financial insecurity until later in life, and by society standards, I had everything, and I was miserable, and I was sick. I mean, I was so miserable, and I live under that $34,000 mark, okay? And I wake up every day now with joy and happiness and purpose, and before I would wake up feeling overwhelmed, and I was in pain, and I was miserable, and I can honestly tell you that money does not bring happiness. What brings happiness is your own lens, your own narrative, what you're telling yourself, what you're believing. I mean, I only wore designer clothes. Most of my shoes were over $1,000, and everything on my body is recycled and from Goodwill or
And you look great, by the way.
Thank you. You know, so
I'm a little envious. I'm having shawl envy right now.
Oh man.
I think we got quite a few pithy answers there for Annie. So, Sean, you can find something there for sure.
One more thing I'd like to add too is, if you're in a situation, Annie, where you're not getting support from your parents, and there's no one else in your life that you're getting support from, Annie, you've got to go out and find people who are willing to support you. So, V, like you said, I went to social media.
Yep.
That's where you went, and you started finding all of these different recipes and different ways to approach life. And I mean, ultimately, that's how we are in this room together, is because of social media eventually got us here.
Yeah.
So, Annie, you got to get out there and find people who are supportive in your life.
And if you want to deep dive into parents, we did an episode about our parents, and Ryan.
I got to talk about all my mommy and daddy issues.
Yeah,
they come up a lot on this show.
It was a good episode. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. What's our next question, Ryan?
Our next question is from Groovelog. Isn't hope simply another form of craving? Isn't it a kind of desire that a minimalist would seek to subdue? So we're here to tell people, stop hoping. No, we would never do that.
It's the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I went through those definitions earlier. I mean, there's so many. In some cases, the answer is yes. If we have hope for a bunch of things and desires for a bunch of things, but we don't know why we're desiring them, like I hope to make $1 billion, but like, well, why? And there's a very specific thing I want to do with that money. Maybe that's a little bit different. But if we're just hoping for these arbitrary metrics and figures and someone else's hopes, then I think it's a recipe for disaster. So my short answer is hope is the antidote to despair. We talked a little bit about how hope and despair both say the same thing about the future. And so the thing I will say is hope is merely the first step, though. You can't hope your way to success. You can't hope your way to good health. Like, I hope I get healthy one day. No, well, what was it?
You're eating a nice piece of lasagna.
Right. Chocolate-covered lasagna.
Right.
So when we talked about the best definition here, hope as a verb, it's to intend, if possible, to do something. Intend, if possible, to do something. So is what you're wanting to do possible? Great. And you can hope that it happens. However, you also have to do it. And so hope is merely the first step, and action is just as, if not more, important. And in fact, I have a few studies here to talk about the neuroscience of optimism and hope. Sean, I hope we can put a link to that was a Freudian slip. I hope you will put a link to both of these studies. The one of them is called The Cerebral Neurobiology of Hope and Hopelessness. And it is a formal study, and then there is a article in Psychology Today called The Neuroscience of Hope. And it talks about willpower, it talks about optimism, and what the science behind that is.
Yeah. So I guess I was going to go to my short answer, but I mean, I don't want to. Do you have anything to add about
Groovelog, in terms of craving? Because I think of it as something different from craving. Like, you didn't, I mean, maybe you craved in a good way. You craved to feel better. You hoped to feel better. You hope to continue to feel good. But it's not one of those desires that, it's not a unnecessary or superfluous desire.
Right. Craving to me is, hope is a power stance, and craving is not.
Ooh, that's a pithy answer. That's good.
Look at that podcast, Sean. She wrapped that up with a bow for you and handed it to you.
That's great. No, it's absolutely true. My short answer is this, and I the reason why I wrote this answer, it is to bring a little bit of clarity of what minimalism is, what it does, because it is too often that they'll hear the word minimalism, and then all these assumptions start to happen. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, well, if Josh and Ryan are the minimalists, they must like live in a completely empty box with just stark walls, and they have nothing in their lives or as little as possible. In fact, we were walking through the airport one time, And this girl was like, "Oh, that's one of the minimalists. He's the guy that lives with nothing."
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's what I hope for.
Were you
Right,
naked
right.
when you're walking through the airport?
Right, just a loincloth.
So this
My one possession.
this is just a little bit of clarity on what minimalism can help us do. So minimalism doesn't eliminate desire. It helps us to be less impulsive in an impulsive world. I wish I could sit here and say, like, buy all 3 of our books, watch our documentary. You got to contribute to our Patreon and get all those Patreon episodes.
And
then
follow us on Twitter.
And follow us on Twitter. And you know what? If you do that, you're going to eliminate all of your desires and you're going to never want to buy anything again. I'm one of the minimalists. I want to buy shit all the time. So it's not about getting rid of these desires. It's about learning how to deal with these desires that we all face every single day.
P.S. Ryan, P.S. V, we have 2 more questions, and they are good questions here. D asks, how can I sustain a hopeful household? So several people in the house, that's something I have to deal with for sure. It's not just about sustaining my own hope, but having a whole hopeful household, right?
I see your note about Hormone Monster here. I can't wait to hear what that's about.
Talk about that. How do I sustain a hopeful household when there are several outside adversaries, especially since I'm raising a teenage son? So we'll talk about hope in households with children. And then also Ian asks, what advice would you give to someone who feels financially and emotionally trapped in their life? We're going to answer both of those questions, and if you'd like to hear our answers to those questions, you can listen to this week's postscript episode over at the Minimalists private podcast. That's right, each week we record an additional podcast episode, and it's available exclusively to our Patreon subscribers. So if you want to support our show and keep this podcast 100% advertisement free, then head on over to theminimalists.com/support. In addition to our weekly postscript episodes, the Minimalist private podcast feed includes our Ask the Minimalists Anything episodes, unreleased recordings of our live events. We did 15 different live events we released to our Patreon supporters last year, exclusively for you all. And you can also check out the entire back catalog of past private episodes. So, Ryan, I think we're approaching 100 private episodes at this point.
Oh my goodness.
So,
Wow.
and that will equal
That's
true happiness for us. So we're approaching.
No, true happiness is 200 private podcasts.
We got a ways to go.
And
then.
200,000 Twitter followers.
Well,
That's
you're gonna have to catch up with us. So if you want to listen to all of those postscript episodes, they are shorter, sort of bite-sized episodes, anywhere from 45 minutes or less. Some of them are even like 8 minutes long. We do these short episodes every week. You get an additional episode, and once you become a subscriber, you'll also receive a personal link to our private podcast feed so that it plays in your normal podcast player, whatever you're using to listen to this right now, like Apple Podcasts or Overcast or Feedly. You can find all the details and all the good stuff, including an additional podcast episode every week over at theminimalists.com/support. And here is a snippet from this week's postscript episode. Your budget creates possibility
Yes,
for
yes.
you.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know where your money is going, then of course it seems impossible, and then you feel pessimistic about the future. You feel despair. And when you feel despair, you feel trapped because you're saying this isn't going to get any better. That's what Ian is saying when he says, I feel trapped financially and emotionally. You're saying, I don't feel like this is going to get any better. I don't see any possibility of improvement. The budget sheds light on possibility.
budget is a little bit of hope.
Yes,
It
absolutely.
truly is.
It is a tool for hope. Okay, now it's time for our added value portion of the show. This is where we each talk about something that has added value to our lives recently, and in the spirit of more is less, I have 2 things that I wanted to talk about this week. So there was an album called First and Foremost by an artist named Plested, and it's like upbeat pop songs about hopeful yearning, and I felt like it was, and I just discovered it a couple weeks ago, and it almost made my top. It made my top 15 list last year, so I do this album list every year. Okay, so
yeah, I know that.
So I put out this list, and he actually made the honorable mentions. I cut it down to 12 people just because I wanted to slim it down. It just looked better to have 12. But I've discovered at the end of the year, I think it's 7 or 8 songs, but they're all great. It's like you put it on, you just walk around for half an hour, and you feel upbeat. It's a very hopeful album.
Wow.
And so Plus did. And also, if you want to check out my year-end list, you just go to theminimalists.com/sound. It's called The Sound of Life. There's a last year's list and then all the previous year's list since we started the Minimalists.
That list is great, man. There's a couple albums on there that I had not heard you recommend or forgot that you recommended that I was going to.
Do you remember any of them?
I'm trying to think of the rap album.
That Young Boy NBA.
Yeah. I mean, it's like an EP that he put out. But it's
oh no, that must have been someone else then. I'm trying to think because he had about 18 songs.
Oh, okay. No, the one thing that was like an 8 song EP that came out this year, 2018. Anyway, my point is that there's just all different types of music there.
There's literally
they're all really good
country
albums.
And pop.
And I'm like discovering new stuff that I didn't even realize had come out this year. It's great.
And then I rediscovered something this week. Last week actually, I rewatched Up in the Air, and I hadn't seen this since we were in the corporate world. It came out in 2009. I saw it when it came out.
About?
Up in the Air. It is a George Clooney movie, and he's like a perpetual traveler.
Oh, okay.
And he's trying to reach his goal of 10 million airline miles because that's how much he flies, and he was going to be like the 7th person in the world to do it or whatever.
Oh wow.
But it is this
what a crazy goal.
Right.
And it has,
what's your accomplishment in life? I flew 10 million miles.
Right.
well, then he has all these other like little sort of sub goals, and it was this perfect synecdoche of like how we get this perceived status. He's like, look at my Hilton Honors membership card, or look at my frequent flyers card, or he's comparing cards with some girl in a hotel bar, and like, look at all these reward points that I get. And,
Wow.
And it's funny how one movie can touch you in a certain way, because we hadn't traveled that much by then. I was just living in Dayton, Ohio, and the only time I traveled was when I drove down to Cincinnati a few times a week. That was the extent of my travel. Or maybe we'd get lucky and drive out to Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And but now, like Ryan and I have, we did I think last year or in 2017, 104 flights or something insane, and so. You get this sense of like, also there is a particular kind of loneliness and this sort of perpetual in fact, I knew something was wrong in 2014 when we started staying in a bunch of like Hampton Inn, and that started feeling more like home than my home.
Yeah.
And I'm like, uh-oh.
Because they all look the same.
They do.
It's like when you go
how
to-
they work.
It's like when you go to Starbucks, like you know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they try hard to create that and give you this sense of home, even though it isn't there. But it was a fascinating movie, and I forgot about the ending. And I'm not going to spoil it for anyone, but oh my goodness, it's such a good film. Like, it was good even without this ending.
Oh, wow.
But with the ending, you're like, oh, I mean, it's one of those movies that bowls you over.
Nice.
And,
Wow.
it's called Up in the Air.
Speaking of movies, I saw Bohemian Rhapsody finally.
Okay.
Have you seen that yet?
Yes,
V?
I did.
I know you haven't seen it.
No, I haven't seen it.
Talk about like a movie about hope. I mean, it's a great movie. I wish I would have seen it sooner. I'm a little jealous because podcast Sean saw it like in the IMAX.
Oh, that would have been wild.
And there's like this the last like 10-15 minutes is it's not actual Queen, it's like the actors who play Queen, but they put on this concert, and I can only imagine seeing it in IMAX. It'd be freaking awesome. But one specific thing I remember about that movie when it comes to hope is Freddie Mercury is trying to talk his I don't know, his manager. It's not his manager. I don't know, the music label, whatever it is.
Oh, I know which.
And he's trying to talk him into like putting Bohemian Rhapsody as the single, and the guy's like, "That's a 6-minute long song
Without a chorus,
right?
Right,
Like
without
that's
a
like that's stupid. Like we're not gonna do that." And he just looked at him and he's like, "You're gonna be the guy who let Queen get away." And then like they walked out, and to me, like that was Freddie Mercury. Like he had the hope, he had his vision, but he also put all the work and the energy into making that vision come to fruition as much as he could. And then he had this one little barrier in the way, and he just went right around it and just kept on the hope.
Yeah.
And now like Bohemian Rhapsody is one of the most famous songs.
And you have to be willing to walk away too. That's the from and to me that's a broader metaphor, right? Because like walking away from the life, like, when you talk about like, well, Italian family and Italian food, like that's part of my identity. It's part of my cultural heritage. 23andMe says I have to eat pasta, right? But then you're realizing like, but wait a minute, like I can walk away from that part of my identity, which by the way is the hardest part to walk away from, is this thing that we get tied up and say this is part of me. And I think it was our friend TK Coleman, who's been on our podcast a few times. He talked about recently, like if you're not willing to walk away in a negotiation, it's not actually a negotiation.
Right.
It's true.
Yeah, amen.
You're just a slave to their expectations at that point.
Yeah.
You always have to be willing to walk away. V, what's been adding value to your life recently?
In the last year, the number one thing that has been adding value to my life, believe it or not, is CBD.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
I'm taking it
Hemp.
right now with the SIBO. Yeah.
Hemp. I have to tell you, and in touring, I don't think I'm the only person saying that. But CBD, not only for me, but for my dog.
So CBD oil, like use like a little tincture thing?
Yeah, so it's not cannabis. So we're not talking marijuana. We're talking hemp. So there's no psychotropic effect, but Mother Nature gives it to us, and it's really been a game changer for me in my wellness program, and one I never saw coming.
Helps with inflammation, helps with stabilization of the gut, and a few other things.
Anxiety, sleep, and no side effects, no negative outcomes. I love things that help me, that are producing no negative outcomes, and really beyond remembering to use it, it requires nothing from me.
Yeah.
I don't know the technical word, but is it a CBD something that you have to build up to, like with Allegra, for example? If you know the over-the-counter stuff, you've got to take it for like a week and build up that drug in your system before you actually start to experience.
I think there are compounding effects, but I mean, I noticed right away the first time I ever tried CBD oil, it made me tired, but in a way where it was like it aided my sleep. I personally generally don't take it every day, except right now with the SIBO protocol I'm on. They do have me taking it every day as part of this entire regimen. I mean, I think if the FDA like raided my house right now, they would arrest me for intent to distribute supplements.
You take it so much.
Yeah. So make sure it's legal wherever you are. It's silly if it's not, but I think it's pretty much illegal everywhere in the United States and Canada at this point. But we have
CBD is.
Yeah, we have listeners in 190 countries at this point, so it may not be legal where you are. So just keep that in mind. All right, Ryan, let's move on to Right Here, Right Now, so we talk about what's going on in the lives of the minimalists. I want to talk about our most recent Screenless Saturday experience. But first, I want to say thanks to V for being here. And if you're listening to this at home, I would strongly encourage you to check out her website. It's paleobosslady.com. Check her out on all the social medias at paleobosslady. And also check her out on the road. I know you're hitting the road again in January. So as this episode comes out, you'll be hitting the road again. It's called the Taking It to the Streets Tour. You can find that over at her website as well. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful.
Thank you for
Appreciate
having me,
you.
and thank you for
You're
inspiring me. I hope that you realize that the Minimalists, your work is a big part of my wellness program, and you've continued to inspire me. And the Screenless Saturday gave me a little anxiety, I'm not going to lie. But
Well, let's talk about that. So have you tried it out at all?
Well, I've been asked to do that a few times, and I'm like, I can't let my tribe down. I can't do it. So like,
Right.
I have anxiety about doing it, but I want to do it. I just have never been able to bring myself.
So when you say you don't want to let your tribe down, it's about like being engaged with them on a daily basis. I do get that. It's funny though, because like we were talking about earlier, sometimes we have this expectation of how our tribe is going to treat us when we do a certain thing, but your tribe loves you, V. They support you. Like they want you to do what's best for you. So I would just encourage you to not let the tribe get in the way, because they love you so much. Like they're gonna forgive you if you take a 24 hours to get back to them.
And it may not even be they forgive you; they'll applaud you most likely, because
Probably.
the expectations are generally not theirs; they're often yours. And by the way, if someone else has an unreasonable expectation, then that's their unreasonable expectation. Like we were talking about with Annie and her parents, like if they have an unreasonable expectation, it's not my job, it's not my duty to adjust their expectation. It's to figure out what my own expectations are of myself. And we've been playing around with the Screenless Saturday thing now for 3 months, and there are 3 ways to do it basically. So it's sort of you can slowly wean yourself off of it, or you can go all the way in. The first week we did it, we dove all the way in.
All in.
It was no screens whatsoever. The easiest way to do it, the reason we started it was like, hey, let's just take a day off social media every week. Jessica, who is our social media manager, she can have the day off. She's not looking at comments or anything like that. She's not sending us stuff to approve on social media. She's just no social media day. And for us, no social media as well. So that's step one. That's easing, as dipping your toe into the water, right? And then if you want to slowly walk into the water, you add no computer as well. So basically, I'm not going to do any work on Saturdays, right? Giving myself the workless Saturday, no computer screen in front of me, no social media. And that's actually what Bex and I did last weekend. Because I wanted to send a video to our friend Matt Diavella. He directed our documentary Minimalism. It was his birthday on Saturday. And so I just said, hey man, it's Screenless Saturday, but I wanted to send you a video and say, hey, I just really appreciate you. Happy birthday, brother. And so I didn't go completely screenless, which is the third way you can do it. You can go all the way, no screens, including your phone, nothing. And we've tried that. You put your phone in a drawer.
It's great.
And yeah, you panic at first, right? Just like you panicked at first because especially you go out, you're like, oh no, I'm naked. Where's my phone?
Yeah, my very first Screenless Saturday, we were in Idaho at a place called Goldbug. It's hot springs, and it's just like if you're ever lucky enough to be in that area, like it's right on the Idaho Montana border. But anyway, like we're getting ready. We were staying the night. We're getting ready to go up the trail, and I was like, oh, I don't have any service, and man, what if Josh needs to get a hold of me? I'm like, wait a minute, it's Saturday. Like I don't have to have that flinch. Like I can leave this in the car, and it's okay. And like the people closest to me understand that I don't have my phone today, and they support me on that. It is awesome. Like to give yourself permission to not care.
And the nice thing is you set that expectation beforehand.
Yeah.
And also the thing to think about is like, I'm probably not the best person to contact if there's a true emergency. So if it's a Screenless Saturday and I happen to have Ella with me, then I mean, she's the only person who would need to actually contact me if there was an emergency. But if she's there with me or Bex is there with me, if Ryan cuts his hand off, because he's operating some sort of saw on a Saturday, please call 911 before you call me.
It's also Solace Saturday. That would never happen on a Saturday.
Solace Saturday.
So I sent the video. Then we went to the Russian bathhouse this weekend. Have you ever gone to a Russian bathhouse?
I have never done it yet, but
there's
I hear
one right
it's
down
an
the street from here. It's called Voda Spa. I strongly encourage you to go there. I think it's $50, $55. You get to spend as long as you want, 3-5 hours there.
It's incredible.
And you go from the hot sauna. This weekend is the hottest I've ever experienced it, Ryan.
250 degrees.
250.
I mean, it's like we were sitting in there and we were joking about how really Voda was just cooking us.
There was a guy who came in and started slicing carrots on top.
Here, hold this onion.
But then you go into a cold plunge pool. It's salinated, so it's 30 degrees, so it's essentially freezing. You go from 220 usually. It was 250 last weekend to 30 degrees, and 220 to 30 degrees, and you feel euphoric. I mean, it is unbelievable. But also, you're getting all the your body obviously eliminates toxins through the skin. It's one of the biggest ways to get rid of toxins. And so if you're detoxing from anything, for me when I was doing heavy metal detox, especially, I had to go 4, 5, 6 days a week to a sauna in order. And I took niacin and other things to help me out with that. But man, you feel amazing afterward. I remember we were there, Ryan. You looked at me. You said, "If we could do this every day, we'd be invincible."
Yeah. I seriously feel like that. Like the first time I kind of felt that sentiment was it was like when we first moved to LA. So it was September, October, so it was cold, and I went to go surf.
Cold.
And it was like cold, ish. The ocean was, and I went with no bodysuit, and it was like a day or two after going to Voda, and like as soon as that water hit me, it was cold, but I was like, this is not that cold plunge. Like this is not nearly as cold as that. And I was everyone else is in bodysuits and shivering and talking about how cold the water is, and I'm just like not even.
I've acclimated.
By it. Yeah,
that's
no,
great.
I love it. It's crazy. Like the especially that cold plunge. Like I've never felt so much discomfort and elation at the same time. Like it is so the range of emotions that I go through when I'm in that cold plunge. It's pretty awesome. It's pretty intense.
All right, I want $1 from everyone in this room immediately.
You still owe me $1. What are you talking about?
Well, I want one from you because Ryan and I. This is the last month, so that you can contribute to this in January. So if you got a few dollars for Christmas and you want to donate one or more of them, now is a good time to do it. Ryan and I are from a place called Dayton, Ohio, and on the west side of Dayton, one of the largest food deserts in the country. 40% of the population in Dayton proper lives on the west side. There's not a single grocery store on the west side of Dayton. We're trying to change that. We're trying to build a not-for-profit grocery co-op that doesn't just provide healthy food options, but also provides education so people know what is healthy, and having access to the healthy food, but also understand why they need the healthy food is equally important, because right now they can get food, but it's Cheetos at the local liquor store, or just bad food, not healthy food. Yeah. And so if you want to help us change that, we are about $30,000 shy right now. So we need 30,000 of you, which on a great week, there's 1 million people listening to this.
So if they all give us like 25 cents.
Yeah, I think the minimum's $1. So give $1. But yeah, if you give $1, we just
there's someone's throwing money right now. I get 25 bricks.
You
did
are awesome.
25
Thank you
bricks.
so much.
Yes,
V.
I did. I thought it was awesome.
My daughter's going around now, and we're walking around like West Hollywood or something. She'll try to pick up a brick and like, hey, will this help at the grocery store? Yeah, and I smack it out of her hand. I say, no, give me $1.
You're such a good parent.
That's just a metaphor, Ella. No, we do need your help though, and so V, thank you so much for contributing to that. And if you all are willing to contribute, just $1 will help out. If you have more than $1, that will help out a lot. We didn't reach our $100,000 goal last year. It's a $3 million grocery store, but we're raising the last $100,000 at this point. And so if you all can help us do that, we're less than $30,000 away from making this thing happen. We hope to break ground later this year, and then hopefully open it sometime in 2020.
I gotta say, man, even if like it ended today, I mean, getting to $70,000, like that's pretty awesome. Yeah. And to anyone who's given to us, V and everyone else, like thank you so much for your contribution. That's incredible. It means a lot to us.
We're really grateful. And Ryan and I are donating $25,000 of our own money to make this happen. So we're also putting our money where our mouth is here. If you want to help out, it's just theminimalists.com/Dayton. Theminimalists.com/Dayton. You can contribute over there. If you want to see the funny video we did about it, go to theminimalists.com/brick, and Ryan and I were trying to steal bricks from a wall in order to make it happen. Oh, and if you want to, it's a new year, and a lot of people have New Year's resolutions. I've noticed on social media recently, a lot of people are asking me about writing. And of course, I teach a 4-week writing class online. It's called How to Write Better. If you want to find more details about that, it's howtowritebetter.org. It is a 4-week writing class, 21 different videos, interactive community, over 60 pages of material, some recommended books to read as well. If you want to learn how to write better, how to develop a writing habit, you want to learn more about composition and editing, you want to learn about publishing as well, all of that is taught in my writing class. Howtowritebetter.org is the link. We'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. If you want to comment on this week's podcast episode, you can do so over at youtube.com/theminimalists. Also on YouTube right now, we're doing quickie episodes of the Minimalists podcast. We're doing living room conversations. We have a bunch of new ones we're going to record really soon. Also, we've had quite a few over the last several months, so those are going well and they continue to get better. And also house tours of Ryan's and my minimalist home. Since we own nothing, it'll just be it'll be like you're following a realtor into a house. That'd be a great parody.
Oh yeah, it would be good.
Oh, we got to do that. All right, we'll see how that goes. And also on YouTube, you can vote for which videos you'd like to see. So each week we put up a poll like, hey, what video do you want us to post in the next week? And we give you 4 different options of videos that you can choose from. So you get to vote for what videos you'd like to see. And on our website right now, Simple Sundays, every Sunday we publish a new piece of writing or a minimalism rule, minimalism tip, minimalism essay, a video, something on our website. And you can get that in your email inbox if you'd like. Just head on over to theminimalists.com. Enter your email address at the top. We'll never send you spam or advertisements or junk because we hate that stuff. And also, we will send you our show notes to every podcast. You always hear me talk to Podcast Sean about put that in the show notes, put that in the show notes. Well, if you're on our email list, you'll also get the show notes every time we put out a new podcast episode. And speaking of simplicity, now is the last chance to sign up for a Simple Year. This is a course that Ryan and I have participated in for several years now, and we do the gift giving portion, but it's 12 months of guided simplicity over the course of an entire year. So for 2019, if you're looking for some guided simplicity, you have different experts from different areas talking about whether it is self-care or diet or travel or gift giving or the holidays, decluttering your home. Each month, we pick a different topic and we dive really deep on that particular topic. If you're interested in 12 months of guided simplicity, if you're interested in a simple year, then head on over to theminimalists.com/simple year. You can check out all the details and read the syllabus over there. Ryan, you got anything else for us?
As always, I just want to encourage people to read more and get informed. Also, here are some voicemail comments and tips from our listeners.
Hi, I'm Nancy from Iowa. Here's a tip about helping to get rid of your parents' stuff and helping others at the same time. My mom is 90 and about to move into a smaller condo after living in a 5-bedroom house on 1.5 acres. All of her 5 children and 13 grandchildren are avowed minimalists. We contacted a friend who helps with immigrants, and after we organized my mom's stuff into segments of kitchen, bedding, furniture, and books, 5 churches came with trucks to distribute these items to needy families. This eliminated the cost to families to not have to go to secondhand stores to purchase essentials. Rather, they are truly donated at no cost to them.
Hi Josh and Ryan, it's Laura from Melbourne. I've just got a suggestion for changing habits, particularly around housework. So instead of procrastinating about having to spend 2 or more hours cleaning your house each week, break house chores into tiny daily habits. I tried to make it fun and easy to remember, so it's almost like a bit of a game in my head. So I have the following: toilet Tuesdays, washing Wednesdays, throw out Thursdays, floor Fridays, shower Saturdays. That way each task only takes 5 or 10 minutes and you can always remember which task to do on what day, and you avoid wasting time procrastinating or losing valuable time out of your weekend.
Hey guys, this is Eric from Jacksonville, Florida, and I wanted to share a tip that I had, that our family had done last year for our daughter's 7th birthday, and she was totally into it. We had on the invitations in lieu of presents to bring a small shoebox full of gifts for poor children in Africa. It was actually through Operation Christmas Child, which is a religious organization, Christian organization, but there are other charities like that, and our daughter really enjoyed it, and all the kids and the parents thought it was a great idea. Also, we've been to other friends' parties in which they've asked in lieu of gifts for people to bring socks, blankets, that sort of thing for the homeless. So just wanted to run that tip by you when people ask about kids' birthday parties and how to avoid all this stuff.
All right, y'all, that's it for this episode. If you have a question for the Minimalists, give us a call, 406-219-7839. And if you would, follow V over at Paleo Boss Lady and paleobosslady.com. V, thank you for being with us today. Also, if you have a voice memo you want to send to us, you have a comment or tip for the Minimalist that we're going to play at the end of each episode, podcast@theminimalists.com is the email address. And if y'all leave here today with just one message, we hope it's this: love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all.
We'll see you next time.
The Minimalists.